Hello. Let's just jump right into it. You heard the video say that a keynote speech has never shaped the future. At Ford, for the last 115 years, hardworking people like yourselves have been doing and building things every day to help shape the future. And so it's really real. When you see the picture of Mr. Edison and Mr. Ford many, many years ago, one has to wonder what they were talking about. Can you imagine that they would have predicted the amount of technological changes that we're seeing today and what that's doing to our industry? Well, I have to tell you that I'm so honored to have the opportunity to represent Ford and to be here to talk with you today. And I want to share some things with you. So let me just tell you a little bit about myself. I worked at Caterpillar for almost 20 years, 18 years, then Honda for 5 years before coming to Ford in 2000. And I have been responsible for customer service for the last decade. So I spent my entire career talking about customer service. And so today, what I want to speak with you about is what has technology done and what is it doing in your space, particularly electric vehicles. We're going to talk about what it means for dealers. We're going to talk about what it's done to some of us in the OEM space. Importantly, we're going to also talk about other technologies that are impacting our space, like connectivity, and how that's going to shape the way electric vehicles work and affect all of us. We're also going to talk about something that you might be surprised to hear me speak about today, and that is that we have to have the capacity to perform great service. And the key to that capacity are trained technicians. So we're going to talk about a problem that we all share that's important for us to address if we want the electric vehicle to be something that works for us, that actually supports us in the future. Because I think if you're like me, you spend a lot of time worrying about that. But after I did my research on this, I'm less worried, and I want to make sure that when we're done here today, you feel better about what it's going to take for us to transition and embrace electric vehicles that are coming our way at a faster pace day after day. So, as we move to the next slide, I wanted to talk about what is causing the vehicle adoption rate that we're seeing today for electric vehicles. One thing is the legislation is changing. You all know that government has been pushing more efficiency in the fleet of cars that OEMs produce. In fact, during the President Obama era, it was up to 50 miles per gallon. But importantly, the focus on reduced emissions is continuing to push the adoption. And we're seeing at the state level where mandated use of vehicles in fleets, government-owned fleets, that's driving adoption, as well as at the municipal level where you're seeing many, many initiatives around transportation, reducing the effect of petroleum in the marketplace. And then, of course, there's major incentives. It's also helping to shape the adoption rate. When you think about it, there are a lot of tax credits being given out. In fact, there's 30 companies in the United States that receive about $2 billion in tax credits who produce batteries or battery materials or battery components. So that's propelling the improvement in the batteries, the technology and the like, and the willingness to invest. Then, of course, OEMs are getting rebates for building vehicles, and that's helping to spur the interest in buying and adopting electric vehicles. And finally, infrastructure benefits. You know, when you're out in California, where we are now, you see that people can jump on in the diamond lane, or you get greater access to toll roads. There are a lot of things happening that the government and other municipalities are using to incent the purchase of electric vehicles. So now consumers are also having their perceptions changed by a number of other factors, such as the fact that the big concern about infrastructure, which is one of the reasons why there was slow adoption, are concerns, as well as the cost itself. Well, those things are changing, because today, 81% of all U.S. citizens have access within 5 miles of an EV charger. That's a big deal. Because in the past, range anxiety and the cost of the vehicle was the number one reason why people were slow to adopt it. Now, that concern is being erased because of the availability of charging. And so range anxiety has gone down as battery life is improving, as the rapid charging is improving, as a number of other factors that's changing. And of course, it's really important that we understand that as we improve the infrastructure, we're going to continue to see consumer perception improve around owning. And of course, we always have had a high percentage of our population concerned about the environment. And those have been the people that have been adopting, and those have been the people who've embraced this technology all along. Now, let's change gears or shift gears a bit. I want to talk to you about something that I think is really important for us all to appreciate. Many think that the conventional ICE business for parts and service is going to actually decline. But the reality is that today in 2018, there's about $800 billion in revenue for parts and service. Well, in 10 years, it's going to grow to $1 trillion. It's going to be over $1 trillion. So in the United States, today it's about $220 billion in business opportunity, when in the future it's going to become $250 billion. So that's $30 billion of increase over the next 10 years that we need to pursue. But it's not about the money. What it is about is that these numbers represent, for the typical OEM, about 30 to 35% of the market share of their particular brand. For Ford, it's about 30%. The balance of that goes to non-Ford service providers. And so when we think about the fact that the electric vehicle is going to be very different going forward in terms of generating revenue for parts and service, and the worry that we have about it, this slide represents the key information that we need to understand going forward. And that is that we know there's going to be growth in this space. The reason we don't grow faster is because we lose customers after about the 3-year period. If we want to be in a position to embrace electric vehicles in the future, it's going to be all about satisfying the customer. I know y'all wish that there was something more complicated than that, but that's kind of it. And we're going to talk about that just a little bit more. Now, another factor that we spend a lot of time thinking about is the fact that there are fewer moving parts in the electric vehicle versus the ICE vehicle. Well, it's about 40% less. And that's important to know. But what you may or may not realize is that experts think that these vehicles, because they'll be largely going into fleets, buses, and the like, people movers, those vehicles are going to be operating longer. And you know, when we have our cars sitting in the garage, these vehicles will still be running and being used. So we're going to see that the mileage number will actually come quicker, so there'll be more repairs quicker for these particular vehicles. And so it's not exactly true that we won't have more repair opportunities, because there's no doubt the revenue is going to go down because we have fewer moving parts. But the reality is, if we can hang on to more of our market share, then we can replace that by retaining those customers. And so that's really important, and that's why taking care of the customer is so critical. And this is another slide. If you think that other slide kept me awake at night, this one is a nightmare for me. Because today, our dealers keep about 30, 40%, maybe 40, 45% first 3 years, after which we see a pretty steep decline very quickly. And this is what I referred to earlier. We've got to change this so that when we get to EVs, imagine if that blue line stayed higher. We have a chance. Guess what? We're going to be the most knowledgeable about the product. We're going to be able to train our technicians the best. They're going to be the most capable. But it's all going to rest on the experience that the customer has when they come into your shop. And it's going to be important for us to do the 3 things that are really important: convenience, trust, and transparency. If we win on those, we have a chance to replace lost business because there are fewer moving parts by hanging on to a greater share of the business. It took us years, as Ali and Ahmed said, to get to the point where customers don't want to stay with us as the vehicle gets older. They perceive us as selling unneeded services and being too pricey. Now, every day at Ford, we're working to make sure we're competitive, to make sure we do a better job of taking care of our customers, and we think that that's going to enable us to be in the right position as we go forward. There's nothing happening on the technological arena that we don't understand or will have a chance to adjust to. It's just a matter of getting our heads around it, embracing it, and then putting in place the right processes to deal with those things. So, I mentioned this. So what does this mean for the typical dealer? Well, we got to keep customers coming back. So satisfaction is the key. Superb customer service and customer experience is what it's all about. Best technicians, so that they are equipped to actually perform the service in a way that no one else can, that gives us a chance to win. Then, of course, advanced tools and equipment. Let's talk about equipment for a second. You might be wondering what kind of investments will dealers have to make as we move to more EVs as a greater percentage of the number of vehicles on the road, which, by the way, today we produce about 260,000 EVs in the US today. In about 5 years, we're going to be producing about 1 million. So in about 5 years, we're going to see that we're going to be commanding about 5% to 6% of what's being sold. It's going to be in 2023 when the dealers begin to have feel the effect of the slow changes in the overall makeup and the mix of units on the road. So you'll have time to figure out how to change your dealers. Whether you take your dealer bays and allocate a number of those bays to do the service for electric vehicles, whether you spend some time figuring out among your staff members who you're going to train and have them prepared to do that and handle that and the new technology that's coming their way, you'll have time to do that. But the most important thing is that the typical dealers will have to invest between $3,000 and $20,000 for new equipment and other changes that they're going to have to make in their shops. It depends on the mix of work you have. Obviously, if you have more fleets, then you will tend to have to invest more sooner because that's where the impact is going to be greater. But most dealers will invest, on average, about $8,000 over the next several years. And that's certainly something that's containable. But it's going to be around those processes that we employ with those investments that's going to make the difference. And I think that that's really important to note. And so, the other thing that I want to talk to you all about, technology around connectivity. Now, everything I just said to you about taking care of the customer, think about how it can be enhanced through connectivity. You know, in 2021, over 300 million units on the road will be EVs. Will be connected vehicles, meaning they'll have an embedded modem. And of course, that embedded modem gives us so much more connectivity to the customer that we have a chance to really transform the way we take care of them. And think about it like a triangle. There's a dealer, there's the customer, there's the car, and there's the company. And in the middle of that, and I guess I could just go to that, in the middle of that is the connected vehicle. Now, we have to have trust of the customer that when we get the information about the vehicle, that we use it wisely, we protect it, and it honors the privacy laws, and we use it to enable greater service where we're easier to do business with. And so I can't emphasize enough that the impact that vehicle connectivity is going to have in our space. You know, when I worked at Caterpillar, and I started, believe it or not, I started 40 years ago. 40 years ago, the first thing they talked to me about when I joined that company was how everything in that company was geared to uptime for their equipment. 500,000 pieces of equipment that's producing $100,000 an hour in the copper mines or the gold mines. They don't want that machine to go down. So guess what they did? Even back then, they were using telematics and connectivity to predict failure. They take parts out before they fail because they understood the durability, and they'd fix those so they'd keep those units running. Now, we may not have to go quite that far, but I'll tell you what they have. Every single dealer has mobile service where they go to where the customer is, meet the customer on their terms, and take care of making sure that it was easy for them to do business with. Those are the kind of things that connectivity will enable in our space. And it will enable us to do so many things like first notice of service, where we'll get the first opportunity to intercede and take care of that customer, bring them back on their terms, or frankly, meet the customer where they want service. And so connectivity can enable us to do what I was talking about earlier about providing great service. That's the key to this whole point. And now, I love this line, Houston, we have a problem. Because all of us in the industry share this one thing, and that's a shortage of technicians. The industry needs 75,000 technicians a year, and we're producing somewhere around 40,000. And I don't even think that's the right number. I'm just using it because I don't know what the right number is. I just know it's a big shortfall. And so we began to do some things at Ford. We already do maintenance and light repair training. We also do ASSET, which stands for Automotive Student Service Education Training. And then we have Ford Accelerated Credential Training. These are the 3 programs that we have that produce, frankly, more technicians than all the other OEMs combined. Now, I'm not mad at you other OEMs, but y'all do come in and raid our schools. So what I want to invite you to do, and I'm going to share our playbook with you right now, because this is not a problem that Ford can solve alone or any one of us can solve alone. We have to work together to energize the community to improve the number of technicians that's graduating. And it starts with educating many of our young folks around the opportunities in the industry. So we want to improve recruiting, training, and recognizing our employees so that we do a better job of retaining. We hired over 6,000 technicians in the Ford dealer community this past year. And we ended up with a net 2,200 gain. 2,200. Now, for the average dealer, every technician that you hire is worth about $150,000, $160,000 in revenue. And most dealers don't have the capacity to take care of customers and deliver the service that they promise. So we have a huge opportunity. And it doesn't matter what's under the hood. If we can't improve in this space, we will not be able to get all we can about what's happening with the changing technologies. And so what we've done at Ford is we have put people literally on the job. We created new job classifications, what we call a placement specialist. And we put them in all the regions around the United States. And what we've done with that is we've said, hey, listen, we need you to go work with every single dealer and customize a program for them to recruit, train, develop their people in the area of technician training. And of course, what that means is that we need the dealer representative, the company representative, to go into the junior high schools, the middle schools, and high schools, and actually do presentations about opportunities in the automotive space. So we're doing that. We're asking the dealers to work with the junior college. We're mapping every dealer to a junior college or a vocational school. We're asking them to sponsor between 4 and 5 students so that we have the volume every year to sustain the programs. Because one of the big failure modes we have in the space today is that the automotive technology schools don't have enough students to sustain the programs. And the beauty of having the dealers sponsor the students, can you imagine? Dealers have to go out and work in the community. They already do it. But specifically, though, to build those bridges between the student and the school. So imagine all you're doing is engaging what they already do well in a different kind of way. And those students then will be tied to the dealership as well as to the school. And the dealers are going to not only provide that effort, but they're going to provide on-the-job training and sponsorship or even some scholarships, maybe even throw in some equipment. And Ford, our role is we're going to provide curriculum to the schools and technical advice. We're going to give them cars, engines, and transmissions so they have latest technology on which to do the work, because that's been a problem as well. And I've given myself a task because we put a lot of money on the table to support this. And the reason I'm sharing this so openly is that tomorrow, I'm meeting with my colleagues here in San Francisco, because a number of us, like-minded folks, are going to share notes, and hopefully we can come together and just learn from each other. Because this is something that the whole nation needs around bringing more people into STEM education and to the technical realm. And this is just part of it. And then over to the right where you see career path, one of the things that we're going to have to do is continuous education. One of the reasons we lose techs, because we don't train them right away. And if you don't invest in someone who comes in, frankly, at a modest wage, and they have a goal to get to a more competitive one, you've got to start investing right now in training, where you tell that new employee, this is your career path. This is how we're going to invest in you. That's not happening today on a consistent basis. So these are the kind of customized programs that we're going to work with the dealers to develop. And we've had a terrific team at Ford that's really embraced this, and we're really excited because we added 2,200 techs last year. Our goal is to add 2,500 this year. So if you're a Ford dealer, be ready when we knock on your door. And then to balance this out, we also go into the military bases, finding those people getting out of the military, return to civilian life, And we are trying to link them to opportunities where they plan to go to. And so there are a number of other companies doing this. We're not the only one, but we're learning, and that's part of our playbook. We're also taking advantage of any government programs, alliances like with Boys and Girls Club, Tech Force, Workforce X, and ACE Education Foundation. They're helping us to populate this whole space. And finally, we're using media, social media to help us get the word out. And so in closing, you can see behind me 3 areas: superb customer service, technicians, and advanced tools and equipment. But I think the point I want to make more than anything is that as it relates to changes that we have to make to handle the growth of EVs, we'll have enough time to do it. It will be gradual. It will be something that is containable from a cost standpoint. But our success is going to be around building those processes that allow us to hang on to a greater share of the market, especially when we get in that space. It's an inflection point. It's an opportunity for us to hone our game. And customers are going to view us differently. And we have a chance to shake off some of those things that have not been favorably viewed by our customers and do something different going forward. We're getting started at Ford. We're investing heavily around taking better care of our customers. And we think that that's the forerunner to us being more successful as we go forward. Because we have the technical know-how, and most of you do in this room as well. And with that, I'll stop talking. And before I do, let me thank J.D. Power for inviting me and giving me the privilege to stand before you and share my views. Thank you very much.
Great job. Let's go have a seat. So reminder that I'm counting on all of you very smart people in the audience to send in your questions, which will be far more pointed than I can ask. And just text them and I can read them off as they come in. Frederiek, thank you so much. That was a really fascinating presentation. I was wondering if you could dive in a little further on this whole pivot and transition to electrification and what it means for dealers in terms of parts and service. If the revenue is not going to be there, let's put fleets aside and talk about the individual consumer who might own an electric vehicle. What are the opportunities for dealers to help them from a service perspective or from additional, what are the additional revenue streams?
Well, I think that what's going to replace some of the conventional repairs of moving parts will be things like we'll see more brakes, more wheel alignments, and more work around the friction area. We'll see more tires. We expect 10 million tires more a year will be sold in a new environment as we go forward. We also expect that there would be more work around the new battery, whether it's refurbishment, whether it's replacement. We're going to have to get to the point where we can do that stuff very competitively. And we're going to have to embrace new things that the consumer will want, like V2V, where we actually build a business to go out to where the customers are and help them charge. And you do that and build a business around that. Those are the kind of things that we can replace. And then, of course, there's accessories. And at first, it's like charging stations and that sort of thing that's related to some of the things associated with the new electric vehicles. And so there will be opportunities to replace that as well. And those are some of the ways that they can do it.
And in terms of the technical training that is needed and the investment that Ford wants to see dealers make in training new folks and collaborating with community colleges, do you imagine kind of like a 2-track system where some people will be in a training system just for electric vehicles and others will be for ICE vehicles, or would you like to see the two combined in some way?
Actually, we think that they will be combined. Even today, there's technology always impacting our training. So what we do is we just update the classes, and the students who are already in the learning mode just learn that as well. So we think it's going to be very easy to actually advance the education and the training of those in the space already. So we see an augmentation versus a replace or one or the other.
Mm-hmm. How do you plan to engage with consumers around electric vehicles? When a customer first buys an electric car, there's a lot to know about charging, about cycle time, about the safety of charging, about planning your route, about what the service needs are. I mean, it's usually a fairly long cycle to convince someone to switch to an electric vehicle. And then once they do, they tend to be very happy about them. But what's the kind of pitch to consumers as they walk into a dealership and, maybe you should consider an electric vehicle for your needs?
Well, first of all, it's going to be so prevalent in our society that most everyone is going to have some sense of what it means to own an electric vehicle. And the beauty of it is the technology is going to continue to improve such that it's going to be highly functional and capable of doing as much as what we're seeing in the ICE. So there's not going to be any negative reason to own the vehicle from a performance standpoint. That's first. Secondly, the cost will continue to come down as you have more and more people entering the battery space, because the battery is the big component that's going to make the big difference. Today, when we have units break, batteries break, the cost of the battery is still prohibitive, and many times is more valuable than the vehicle. And so that poses a dilemma, and consumers know that. But what you're going to see is it's going to become more and more affordable for the common person as more and more OEMs get really serious. I mean, for example, at Ford, every vehicle we make is going to have an electric version. And the silhouette that I showed you on the silhouette, that's the future Ford Mustang. And that's going to be the most powerful Mustang we've ever built. So the technology is going to be there, and you're not going to have to convince them. Because when they walk in the showroom, they'll see those vehicles there as an opportunity, and then it's just a matter of singing the praises of the attributes.
What kind of battery warranty do you imagine vehicles will have? 5 years, 7 years, mileage based?
Hey, one member of my team, will you raise your hand what you think is going to be for battery warranty?
Battery warranty, 8 to 10.
Like
8 to 10 years.
I said, everybody, 8 to 10. Thank you, Dave.
Great question from the audience. Can you envision cars that drive themselves in for service so that you don't need a fancy dealership because the customer doesn't see it?
Well, I can envision cars driving themselves somewhere to be serviced. And the dealer's going to have to decide if that's going to be them. And the way they gear and the processes that they put in place. And now we're not talking about EVs. We are talking about EVs, but they also...
Or AVs.
Yeah, they're also AVs. So that's a whole nother animal. But what it's going to take for us to be ready for that has a lot to do with how we shape the services around that. But absolutely, there's no reason why we won't be in a position to do that. It's a choice.
And how is Ford working with dealers to make them more enthusiastic about selling EVs?
Well, I think that, frankly, the technology is such that we have to. I don't think it's a matter of us convincing the dealers. The dealers just want to see Ford produce the vehicle so that they're competitive in every way. And it's incumbent upon us to do that. And we're doing that by observing, by surveying, by getting a sense. But most importantly, we have some really, really sharp people at Ford. And I think that we're on the cutting edge as well as anybody. And those who think we're behind and not really up to speed, they're not. We want to be able to deliver to the promise. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves because there are still some unknowns for sure. But I feel like we're going to be as competitive as anyone out there, and our dealers are going to embrace where we are.
So most people think of Ford, they think of the F-150, which has been so successful. How excited are you about an electric truck?
Oh, I'm very excited. I think that whether we like it or not, change is coming. And so we might as well embrace it. And then we need to do it extraordinarily well. And of course, you know that that's our bread and butter vehicle. And so you can bet your bottom dollar, all hands on deck as it relates to that electric truck. It's going to be just as good as we see the regular truck.
And what are the specific opportunities around a truck when it comes to electrification? Because you can do a lot with load balancing for workers who are contractors, and I mean there's a lot with hydraulics. Could you get a little bit more into beyond the basics? What it is particularly about a pickup truck that lends itself to electrification, or the opportunity there?
No, I don't know that it's going to like dance in the streets or anything like that. It's just going to be very functional, and it's going to allow us to compete in an area where you're going to see a transformation away from petroleum powered, and the propulsion is going to be electric. And the key for us is to be able to not only do what we do from an attribute standpoint and feature standpoint, but also do it. The difference is just what's under the hood. That's the difference. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how I would like to answer that. Because I'm not the most technical guy, I just kind of know where we're going generally.
For a long time, the perception in the auto industry, or at least here in California from where I sit, is that automakers were making electric vehicles because they were compliance cars. They had to do it to comply with the state of California, and it was like everyone was dragging their feet, kicking and screaming.
Yes.
Clearly, there's been a pivot. Like, what drove that pivot? I mean, where do you sort of feel like everything flipped? Because now everyone's talking about electrification.
Well, the reality is that we have to meet customers where they are. And we know that the adoption rate is increasing. And we understand what the future holds. It is literally the future. We can't sit and debate whether or not we need to move there and do it in a great way. It's sort of, that's the winning formula. And we've embraced the winning formula. Just like our customers are telling us what that is, and just like our dealers are telling us what those are. And so it's not so much about pivoting as much about, it's about survivability. We have to get this right. And so we're all over it.
Is the Ford logo going to stay the same? Build Ford Tough?
I think that's such a sweet logo. I can't imagine that it's going to change. That'll always be one of them, and so absolutely.
Okay. With connected vehicles, there's going to be an enormous amount of data and the privacy concerns that come along with everyone having this data. Who owns and has access to this information, and how is Ford preparing to manage all of this data?
Well, you know what? We have a department inside of our company that really helps us to manage the privacy laws. And everything we do, someone is scrutinizing, making sure that we are managing it well. And, you know, we don't get into ownership because I find that data comes in different forms from different people, but it's kind of the same data because different people have access to it. But our job at Ford is to convince our customers that we're going to use it the right way, protect their interests, and use it to serve them better.
So will Ford own the data? Will it be like opt-in, opt-out?
We don't talk about ownership. You tell me who owns the data. I don't know. And I don't want to say anything up here that someone's going to call me on the carpet for. So I'm not sure.
Okay.
I can just tell you that the data is going to be pivotal for us to be able to connect with consumers and do a better job of serving them. You trying to get me in trouble?
No. Is it safe to assume that traditional powertrain technology will improve as the battery technology kind of goes down this improvement curve?
Ask me that again. Start again.
Is it safe to assume that traditional powertrain technology will improve as battery technology does the same?
Absolutely.
Are they sort of on a parallel track
Absolutely.
in terms of improvement?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that you're going to see fuel efficient and I should say efficiency of the vehicle improve with the powertrains going forward as well. There's no doubt about it. And you know, it's a different game. I understand it's battery powered, but everything that propels that vehicle is going to improve.
Okay, now all the questions are rolling in. Hold on one second. When do you feel that Ford or other manufacturers will truly have vehicles that can compete with Tesla?
Tomorrow. Hello. I mean, check us out real closely. You might find that to be the case today. You know, it's not like it's some kind of revelation what the technology is. It's a choice, and so you're going to see more emphasis around that. And when we emerge, we'll be able to play the game. We are capable of playing the game as well as anybody. Okay.
Here's a question that clearly came from someone in the audience. Some people are forecasting car dealer fixed operations absorption rate dropping to 25% from the current NADA average of 49.7% based on electric vehicles. Do you expect a sizable fixed operations rate GP drop? You'll have to.
No, my honest opinion is this. I spend a lot of time with dealers all over the world. And what I see is those dealers who take fixed operations business seriously, they've got more business than they can handle. If every one of the 46 million Fords on the road came to our dealers today, we would not have the capacity to handle them. So why do we talk about the fact that we don't have enough business? I'm saying, and now you're talking to a guy that wants to grow the business, so you asked the wrong question. I don't think there's any reason for dealers not to be able to sustain themselves if they get really focused around fixed ops. And you know, and frankly, with what's happening with the price of vehicles and the margins on vehicles, you know, the used vehicle space, as one of the speakers earlier said today, and the fixed ops, it's going to be so key, particularly to sustain the transition as we transform the industry. It's like embrace it. You know, get behind it in a way like you never have, and make sure that those services that we dispense are really rated at the top level, 5-star, and we'll have a chance. And they can go from 49%. And I don't think, if you assume that that's going to happen to you, it surely will. But I'd be figuring out how I can retain a higher share of every car that I sell so that I have a chance of beating that number.
In terms of just macroeconomics, are you concerned at all about the economy tipping into a recession? And you know, what sort of macro trends are you looking at in terms of the trade war, the government shutdown, consumer spending, housing starts? I mean, all these things affect the auto industry. A lot of people have been saying that we're kind of due for, you know, a dip in auto sales going into 2019.
Well, I've been living long enough to know there's a dip coming. I've just not been living long enough to tell you when. And I think that anyone can forecast that. I think it's going to be accurate. But that's one day, the depth of it, the impact that it will have, I don't know. I spend more time worrying about that, about my own personal account, than I do and what is going to happen in the greater economy. If you're like me and you're trying to anticipate that, but I think that based on what the experts are telling us, that the automotive market in the U.S. is going to be strong for the foreseeable future. At least that's what the pundits are saying, the experts.
And with so many choices out there and so many automakers focusing on this concept of conquest, how does Ford retain its brand loyalty? I mean, most of your customers are pretty brand loyal, as far as I can tell. But how do you keep that going when there's more and more consumer choice, and when people are increasingly fickle, and you've got these new millennials and Gen Zs buying cars for the first time?
Yeah, it's what I said in my presentation. I think that we have to do a great job of making sure they have a great experience. Where the three biggest things is convenience, transparency, and trust. And I think we have a chance to, if we're taking ourselves very seriously today about making sure that customers are happier. I mean, I can't get into all the investments we're making around that, but let me just assure you, as the leader of customer service, that we get that, and that's where we're focused. We think that that's our winning formula.
Do you think that consumers fully understand the big transition that we're in the midst of in terms of connectivity, autonomy, electrification, ride sharing? I mean, all of these sort of, you know, big trends that are really upending the way that traditional business has been done. Is the average person aware that we're in the midst of this big shift?
I don't think the average person is nearly aware. When you look at the number of units on the road and the fact that people are owning cars at an average of 11 years, think about it. A lot of people aren't even going back into the market right now. And so when they come into the market, they might pay attention, they may do some research, and then they can become more informed. But I think it's incumbent upon all of us in the space to do a better job of messaging what's happening so that people are educated, you know, and I think that that's going to be part of the key. But of course, once you get them, it's up to you to keep them, because you'll have your opportunities. We lose as many defecting as we gain. So think about that as a winning formula.
And how do you message autonomy? Because there's been a lot of research studies that show that consumers are increasingly skeptical. We had a lot of incidents recently with, you know, the Uber accident, and, you know, originally there was this big excitement around autonomy. Now that there's been a little bit of a pullback in terms of the consumer acceptance rate and when these vehicles are actually going to be here.
Well, at Ford, we've been particularly sensitive to not getting ahead of our skis, so to speak. And so we recognize that this is a very complex thing. You know, the technology that operates AVs when the snow's coming down at a furious pace, rain is coming down at a furious pace. A cat crosses the street versus a person. You understand? Do you avoid whatever? You can see the complexity, and then all the infrastructure that's required to actually be able to have those. So we are working very hard to understand how you make all those things converge at the right time with the technology matching the physical environment to actually create that. And so we know that we are equal or close to being among all the best that's ready for this. But you're right, we should be a little cautious, and a lot of people I think are getting ahead of their skis. This is Frederiek talking, not Ford Motor Company. But I do believe that we're in a position to do as well as anyone in the space.
With your partnership with Argo AI and just also
among that, our partnership with Argo is really working well, and there's a number of other things we're doing to position ourselves.
Care to tell us what they are?
No.
Can you make the connection between electrification and connectivity more explicit? All of these cars are going to be processing an enormous amount of data, and EVs and AVs alike are going to be processing a lot of data. Where you charge.
Yeah, exactly. You know, there are apps out there where you can go on and find out charging stations, right? And then there are, the mere connectivity will allow us to actually track the usage of the vehicles, predict certain failure modes or when they might have an issue, and get ahead of that. So, I mean, I tried to explain it a bit in my presentation, but just suffice it to say that with the advent of the embedded modem, we can actually, you know, do what we call first notice of service. We can tell you when you're going to need service. That's huge. Imagine being able to
Proactive.
Yeah,
preemptive
proactively
service.
bringing them in, having a place for them, getting them in and out, getting the customer in and out on their terms, knowing whether you have to have a loaner available. On and on. It is so transformative if we get it right and take it seriously. I just think it's huge. And combined with all these other technologies, it's going to change the way we operate and use our vehicles and experience our vehicles.
So what kind of car do you drive right now?
Well, I happen to be driving a Lincoln Continental, since you asked. And my wife drives a Navigator, but I also have a wonderful Mustang. So
Okay. You've got all three.
Yeah, we got all three.
Great. I wanted to make sure that I understand that you have a special video that you want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to see. Do we have time for that now?
Yes, and let me just say thanks to everybody again. And as we leave the stage, pay attention to this video. I'll give you a hint. It's a bullet on the streets of San Francisco. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.